Hello everybody, this is the Empirical Audiophile. In this video I want to talk about, well, transformers. You have your power input transformers and you have your output transformers of amplifiers. Now, this is something that hobbyists don't understand about transformers. This may be a little boring to you for some of you, but once you understand about how an amplifier works with its transformers, input or output, you can better understand why a lot of hobbyists who try to upgrade their amps and stuff with expensive caps or resistors get very little outlay for their time and trouble. And that's because the heart of the whole system of an amplifier is those output transformers and the input transformer. There's no playing around with that. That's the heart of the whole amp. And you get amplifiers, let's say, made in China. And if they use cheap output transformers, you're not going to get much out of them. Even if you replace the caps or anything, you're going to get very little outlay for your money. That's why it's not worth putting expensive parts in a inexpensive amplifier or integrated amplifier, because it's just not worth it. You're not going to get much for your money. And anything you do here probably is going to be placebo effect, because those transformers, input and output, make a big difference. Being an engineer that dealt with laminations, that's how you find out is there's a lot to let's say, output transformers than just windings. The laminations themselves make a huge difference. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, audio research. And this is a true story. This happened to audio research. They were getting their transformers from a vendor in the United States. And they decided to switch vendors to a Chinese vendor. So they gave them all their specs, which you can go online and you can specify anything you want, just about. And you can find a company that will probably sell you an input or output transformer, whether that transformer is what they call square iron transformer. It could be round. Now, like in my Pioneer SX50, it had a round iron, that's what they call it, round iron, that would be the name, transformer in it. These are more recommended than the square ones because of the fact they can put more output. They stay cooler because the laminations are separated a little bit, and they're able to handle putting out a lot of power. So they also have round, what they call ferrite transformers, are your round ones. They also make them in ferrite, but I'm not going to get into ferrite. I'm just going to get into what they call the iron ones. Now, audio research, as I was saying, changed their vendor to a Chinese vendor because they were cheaper. Now, people don't understand that good iron that you're going to put into an amplifier, if you're going to get it already made and wound, it's expensive. And all you have to do is look on the internet, even go to AliExpress, for example, and you're going to spend hundreds of dollars on a good power transformer or your output transformer. You're going to spend hundreds of dollars, even on AliExpress. So you can imagine the better quality the transformer, output transformers are, the higher the price is. That's how it goes. So audio research got these transformers in from China. They met all their specs, and they built all these amps with the transformers. Then they broke them in, and now it was time to test them out. They test them out sonically to hear each and every one of them to make sure they have Audio Research's sound. A lot of companies are like that. They'll have their sound quality. Macintosh. You listen to a Macintosh, they have the Macintosh sound. Conrad Johnson has the Conrad Johnson sound. Mark Levinston, Jeff Rowland, they all have their particular sound quality that their amps make. Also, the Italians, they have their particular sound quality. You know, Audio Note, you know, the Angaku. It has its particular sound quality. So in order to get that particular sound quality, it takes a lot more than just maybe buying something off the shelf. I'll get into that in a little later. So the Audio Research, they built all these amps. It's time to listen to them. They listened to them. No, they did not pass muster. They listened to some other ones they built. Nope. So, man, they had the hardest time trying to figure out what in the hell is going on with these amps. They don't sound the same. They started going through everything. Finally, they took the power supplies out and put the ones that they used to get from their old vendor from the United States that cost more. And then they tried out the same amp. All they did was replace the output power supplies, transformers, and their sound was back. So they had realized something, that not all output transformers or input transformers are the same. They are not. Now, there's reasons why that hobbyists don't think about. Now, if you get into the lamination end, no one thinks about the laminations. All you do is you look at an output or input power supply and you think nothing about the lamination. Everybody talks about, oh, the wiring. The laminations make a big deal. When you get in a company, what they do is they get a roll of steel. A roll of steel costs anywhere between $200,000 to $300,000 for a roll of steel. The vendor will cut some of that steel off of that roll, and they'll send it to the company. The company will send that steel through a die, and they'll cut it a certain size so they can send it to the QC lab. Now, in the company I worked for, the QC, everything was ISO certified because we were aerospace engineers. So everything had to be ISO certified, meaning it had to be right on the money because, you know, you deal with automobiles, you deal with aerospace, you're dealing with companies like Tesla, Harley Davidson, you're dealing with power plants, actually making big, huge lamination dies for 24 feet in diameter. And you have to be ISO certified. So they take these laminations, they'd cut them a certain size, then they'd send them to annealing and through the furnaces. Then they would come back. Then the QC would get them. Then they would stack them and they would test them out. They have to test out the steel. Does the steel meet the requirements for the electrical properties that it's supposed to meet? Now, if it didn't, then it got rejected. That means the vendor could not send that roll of steel to us. It was rejected. The steel would have to be sent to another vendor that would accept it because we could not accept that steel. It did not meet the requirements of our vendors because we were ISO certified. So that goes to show you that laminations are very critical on their properties, real critical on their properties. The tolerances are very tight, and a die that makes, for example, laminations for your output transformers or input, whether they're C output transformers or input transformers, where the laminations look like a C or whatever, we would usually call those dies E and I dies. Okay. If they were round, they were just round. You could call them cookie dies, but An E&I die is usually going to make power supplies or output transfer. They do have, like they call C, where the laminations look like a C and they put them together. You'll see audio note use transformers like that besides the square ones. We look at them in the back of amps and we think nothing about it. Now you go to manufacturers and have them all wired up, but some manufacturers, like let's say Macintosh, you got Union Research, they wind their own. Audio Note, they wind their own. So what they do is they get the laminations in and they do all their own windings because they want control of how it's going to be wound up and what kind of copper they're going to use, or in Audio Notes with the Agaku, they're going to use silver. So they're going to do their own windings in-house, and therefore they want control of everything. Now, when Macintosh does their own windings, for example, they put them in cans, that would be the housing, and they fill them full of tar. Where Audio Note, for example, when they do, after they're done with their windings on their output transformers or something, they dip them in paraffin. Okay, it's just not any paraffin. According to Audio Note, it's a special paraffin from them dipping it and listening to it that they know that they put it in there. They put it in there for like 5 hours before they take them out to help seal it up. Now, this is not uncommon. You can get your copper foil inductors, which are used in crossovers. You can get your solid core inductors or air core inductors, which are, used in speakers, as we all know, and they seal in wax. In fact, my old L-Techs, the inductors are wax coated to seal them up. They don't oxidize then. Unison Research, for example, I don't know if they use a wax or some kind of special material that they dip theirs in to seal them. And you have to seal them so they don't oxidize. Even though you can use oxygen-free copper, or you can use copper, with a silver coating on it, you still have to seal it. So, like I said, some may use paraffin, some use a different kind of material. We know that Mac uses tar. And this is for resonating frequencies, won't bother them, but so they do not oxidize. So because that's the heart of a amplifier or an integrated amplifier, those output transformers, that's going to make all the difference in the world on the performance of that amplifier. So you can put all the great parts that you can think of in that amplifier, and without those output transformers or input transformers, it's going to be useless. Now, this is where people get in trouble. So we understand, we wonder why. Well, why does that cost so much? Well, it's expensive. Hand windings in-house, that's expensive because someone's doing it by hand, making sure they wind it correctly. And I think there's videos out there of companies like Mac will show you them hand winding their output transformers and stuff like that. Audio Note, they show them, there's videos of them hand winding their transformers because that's the way they want it, and their power supplies. Your Italian companies, the ones who make the best laminations that will make the biggest difference is United States, United Kingdom, Italy, and Germany. All these countries I know make excellent laminations for input and output transformers. Countries that I know do not make very good laminations is like China. I don't know why, but China just doesn't do very good, whether their quality control isn't there, whether they don't care, or it could be the steel. As I explained to you, the steel has to have certain properties. If it doesn't meet the qualifications to do what it's supposed to do, it's rejected but not in China. Apparently, they have looser tolerances on their steel, and therefore they make these, power output transformers, which you can buy off AliExpress, and they're good, but they're not the best. So if you want the best, a lot of companies feel they have to do it in-house, where it's puzzling that Audio Research gets theirs from the outside, but they get it from a vendor that's reputable vendor. And they learned their lesson by buying cheaper ones from China. They learned their lesson. No, you will not get the Audio Research sound quality. Now, here's what hobbyists fail to understand. They go and they take these cheap amps from China, $300, $1,500, $3,000, whatever, and they start replacing the caps and resistors with better caps and better resistors, and they start bragging about how great it sounds. Well, a lot of it is the placebo effect. A lot of these people who have YouTube channels, they take these integrated amps apart and they realize these are horrible amps. Where are these people coming up with replacing caps and wasting their time on these amplifiers? In fact, there's a YouTube channel, Skunky, and she builds amplifiers for people. She builds a very good channel if you're into, stuff like that. And she builds these amplifiers. Well, she's building amplifiers for people, and she gives them a price point. But she says, hey, if you want better output iron in this amplifier she's building, she says it will be a $500 upgrade. That's substantial, $500 upgrade. I wonder how many people bid on that. But she said with these better output transformers in her amp, you're going to get better lows, better high frequency. You're just going to get better sound staging. But once again, it's a $500 upgrade. And, that's only the tip of the iceberg on some of these output transformers. But, a lot of people don't realize that when you buy these inexpensive amplifiers coming from China, whether they're integrated or solid amp, and these people are giving these amplifiers rave reviews, which once people start getting into them, they find out power supplies are bad, and without the power supplies or without your output transformers being top notch, a lot of times trying to upgrade these, you're going to get very little for your money. So I thought I would do a video on that, just giving you, it's not just the windings that make an output transformer sound good, like the Agaco. I heard the Agaco back in about 1990, 98, 99. I heard it. And yeah, it sounded wonderful. Of course, they made a big deal over, it's got silver wiring, everything's silver in it. Well, even the wiring is good, but the laminations themselves make a big difference also. You buy cheap laminations that don't meet the specs and requirements, you're going to have a crappy transformer. I don't care if you put silver on it. I don't care if you make solid gold wire or platinum wire on it. If those laminations are garbage, you have a garbage output transformer. If you're like me and you go to these shows and you listen to amps and stuff, and they're getting more and more costly, and you're finding out, it's a $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 amp. It really doesn't sound anything better than I heard, 20 years ago. Now you understand why. They could put the best parts in the world in there, but without the input and output transformers being, until the technology can catch up, you're limited on what kind of sonic quality you are going to have out of an amplifier or integrated amplifier. You're limited on those items. So until next time, this is the Empirical Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something of why, and why if you go through a lot of trouble replacing caps in something, it may not make as big a difference as you would like it to make, because the transformers, output transformers, They're just your limiting factor. So until next time, happy listening.